Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for the 2022 Idaho Republican Primary Candidate Forum. My name's Daniel Silver, and I'll be your host for this evening. First, I know you had a lot of things you could be doing tonight, and we want to thank you for joining us. It's a really important thing that we're going to be watching tonight. We're going to be meeting with every single candidate who's running for statewide and federal office. And that person has the opportunity to represent you and me and all of Idaho for the next 2, 4, or even 6 years, depending upon the position. It's not something we should take lightly. So what we're going to be doing is sitting down for about 10 minutes with each of them tonight, and we're going to hear what's on their heart, learn a little bit about them, learn where they think things are going well or not within Idaho, and if given the opportunity, where would they take us in the future. Now, before we start, though, it's important to know that as an organization, Idaho Young Republicans does not endorse any candidate during the primary season. That's not our role. Instead, we want to make sure that you're as informed as you can be. And so that's our hope, that you get an opportunity tonight to learn about each and every candidate, and then you know what's best for you and your family. You know what's best to take you into the future. We just hope we can make that decision a little easier for you. So up next, we're talking with candidates for U.S. House of Representatives, and we have 2 of those races here in Idaho. These candidates represent the entire state for their district, District 1 and District 2. And we will get right to that with our first candidate. So let me first say welcome to Congressman Mike Simpson. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Good to be with you.
Been around the scene for a little bit, but let's pretend that we don't know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Idaho. I was born in Burley, Idaho, and grew up in Blackfoot. Now live in Idaho Falls, but I spent my entire life in Idaho. And when I was growing up, I worked on a farm, moving pipe and doing other things on the farm, taking care of cattle and going out at 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure the first year heifers weren't having a problem with their calving, and spent all the time doing that, and realized how hard farming really is. So that was part of my upbringing, and in fact, the first time I saw my wife, her dad was a farmer, and I saw her baling hay, and she had on her pants and a bikini top, and I thought, that's a girl I'd like to get to know. So we started dating when we were in high school, and been married for 51 years now. So that's pretty much me.
So U.S. House, one of the highest ranking roles in Idaho to serve on a national level. What makes you uniquely qualified?
Well, I think I'm uniquely qualified, and anytime you're an incumbent running, it's based on your record and what you've been able to do for the state of Idaho. And if you look back over the years that I've been in Congress and the work that I've done for the state of Idaho and for the people of Idaho, whether it's the farming community and the fact that we have done a lot of great things for agriculture. And in fact, most farmers will tell you that I was the go-to guy in Congress when they needed something in the farming industry. Whether it's protecting the waters of the United States, or the overreach of the EPA on the waters of the United States. That's something we fought with the Obama administration on, and I prevented them from enacting their rule by language that I added to an appropriation bill, which, I'm a senior appropriator, which means I can add some of that language, which stopped them from doing that. And then Trump came in and wrote a new rule, which made sense. It was a good rule, and now Biden is trying to rewrite it again. So we need to stop that from happening again. I've also been able to delist wolves in Idaho, so that wolves would be managed by the state of Idaho and not by the federal government. Did that through adding language to an appropriation bill. I've prevented sage grouse from being listed in the state of Idaho through language in an appropriation bill, and those types of things. And I've also made sure that the INL becomes one of the premier laboratories in the Department of Energy's complex. When I was first elected, I think it was in my 3rd year, President Bush, his first budget was to clean up and close the INL. And with the other members of the delegation, Senator Craig, Senator Crapo, and then it was Representative Otter and myself, we got busy and turned the INL into what it is today, and that is the lead nuclear lab in the country. In fact, leading the country in cybersecurity also. So it's an important aspect of the economy of southern Idaho, and it's important to the country. Those are the types of things I've been able to do in Congress, working with the people of Idaho, and will continue to do so in the future.
So anyone who watches the news today, it's no surprise, there's a lot going on, right? Inflation, coming out of COVID. As you look at all the things that are going on, what do you see as the two biggest challenges facing, Idahoans or Americans as a whole? And if elected, how'd you tackle them?
Well, there's a couple of things that are facing not just Idaho, but the country as a whole. One is inflation. The numbers came out, and I think March was 8.5% or something like that inflation, which is outlandish. That's the highest rate since Reagan took office, the Jimmy Carter inflation years and stuff. And so we've got to get that under control. And the other thing is gas prices. Gas prices add to inflation. Now, I know the Biden administration is trying to call it the Putin gas increases. Gas prices had increased 70% before Putin invaded Ukraine. It's added to it, but it's not the main cause of it. The main cause of it is that when Biden took office, he declared war on the fossil fuel industry. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline. He canceled leases on federal lands, which is where a lot of the oil and gas is. He stopped allowing for natural gas development, and he stopped the offshore oil drilling, which is where a lot of our oil comes from. And after years and years of trying, we were energy independent 2 years ago. Now we're calling Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, asking them to pump more oil to keep the prices down. That's just crazy. We need to get back to an all of the above energy policy that we had under the Trump administration, which we can do. But the way we're going to be able to do that is by, through the appropriation process, preventing him from doing some of the executive orders that he does. And the way you do that is you add bills, you add language to an appropriation bill that says none of the funds in this bill can be used for X, Y, or Z. And that's how you stop it when you don't have the presidency. It would be nice to have the presidency, but we don't. And he's going to be there for the next 2.5 years. So it's important that we have senior members on the Appropriations Committee, like I am, so that we can add some of this language to prevent some of these things that the Biden administration is doing. Frankly, the Biden administration is doing far, far, far too much by executive order. Congress has to take back some of the authority that it's given to presidents in the past, or allowed presidents to take. As you saw earlier this month, he is trying to enact gun regulations that should go through Congress and be debated in Congress, but he's doing it through executive order. I don't think he can do that. I think we have to stop that. But you have to be in the majority to do that. That's why this election is so important. Those are the things that I'll be working on. But those are the things that are important to Idaho. How do you keep inflation down? You got to quit spending all the money that we've been spending. We spent, I think, a year and a half ago, when COVID first started, in a bipartisan way, we felt that we had to do something to try to keep businesses open, to keep employees from going on unemployment rolls and that type of stuff. And so in a bipartisan way, we passed some COVID relief bills. And then the Democrats a year ago decided that wasn't enough. They passed a bill all on their own that was $1.9 trillion in COVID relief. Very little of it went to COVID relief. Most of it went to their Green New Deal plans and that type of stuff. So all Republicans voted against it. And now they're talking about another COVID relief bill that they'd like to pass. We've got to get back to doing normal things again, getting our budget under control. We need to head toward a balanced budget. I've been a supporter of a balanced budget amendment ever since I was in Congress. We need to keep working on that and try to get it in place.
So one of the things we hear from a lot of our members and people across Idaho really is just concern about federal overreach. As a U.S. House representative, how do you combat that and protect Idaho's sovereignty?
Well, the way you do it is just like I said. You prevent them from doing it by putting language. At least when you're in, when the president is of a different party than you are. If you're in the majority in Congress, you can write the appropriation bills, and that's must-pass bills. The 12 appropriation bills must pass. That's what keeps the government funded. And so you can add language to those bills which prevent the administration from doing some of their overreach. That's how we stop them from enacting the WOTUS rule. That's how we stop them from listing sage grouse and other types of things. That's what we'll have to do with this administration for the next 2.5 years. Because, face it, President Biden's going to be there for 2.5 years. I think after that, we have a good chance of getting a Republican president, frankly, and that's what we really need to do. But in the meantime, it is vitally important that we elect a Republican House and Senate to stop this overreach by the federal government. And it is in almost every area you look at that they are overreaching.
All right, so one last question. A week from today, everyone's going into the ballot box. What do you want them to remember about you before they make their selection?
TV will be a lot funner to watch after a week from today because people get tired of all the campaigning and all that kind of stuff. I understand that fully. Primaries are primaries and elections are elections, but they're an important part of our democracy, and everyone needs to get out and vote. Vote for the candidate of your choice, whoever that might be. I hope it's me. I've enjoyed your support in the past. I've tried to be a representative that you could be proud of. That's what I will be in the future.
Congressman Mike Simpson, everybody. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you.
So next, we're talking to U.S. House candidate Brian Smith. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Daniel, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Appreciate it. So let's start off with one. Just tell us about Brian.
So a lot of people don't realize that my family actually settled Canyon County in 1864. They were three, there's actually four brothers, came out from Missouri. They got into Canyon County and they got sick and they stayed the winter, built a log cabin that's still standing in Canyon County today. And so I've been in, they were my great uncles, and I've been in Idaho my whole life. I graduated from Nampa High School. I came back to Idaho after going to law school, and I went to law school in California. Graduated from BYU, went to law school, came back, and I've been living in Idaho Falls since 1994, where my wife Sharon and I have raised 5 children. They've all moved out of the house. I can now find my tools again. And I have a law office. I've had small businesses, and we really like living in Idaho Falls.
So U.S. House, one of the highest ranking roles in Idaho to serve on a national level. What makes you uniquely qualified to serve in that role?
Well, I appreciate that question. First of all, I'm not a politician, so I think that gives me some bonus points, frankly. And I have always had an interest in serving others, and I think that I'm uniquely qualified at this moment in history to run for Congress. I understand the role of the federal government. I understand the federal government's role under the Constitution. There are actually about 20, maybe 21 things that are delegated from the states to the federal government, and we have gone far afield from that. And I think that because I'm a lawyer, I've studied the Constitution, I've argued constitutional cases in front of the Idaho Supreme Court. I understand the proper role of the federal government. I think that gives me a unique qualification. And frankly, we need somebody who's a fighter. I'm a conservative who fights. I fought I fought against expansion of Obamacare in Idaho. I fought as one of Trump's delegates in the 2020 election, and now I'm running to fight for you, the voters. And so I've never been afraid to speak my mind or to speak my piece, and we need somebody who has a titanium spine who will speak up for us. As I travel the district, too many people feel like they don't have a voice in Washington. And for me, I've always been able to speak a voice. And I think we need somebody from Idaho who will stand up and speak for us against what I describe as the liberals and the Democrats and the leftists who want to turn our country into a socialist dumpster fire. And so I've been a practicing lawyer for 30 years. I've been involved in Idaho politics. I've been speaking in different places. And for all those reasons, I think that uniquely qualifies me to be the congressman.
So anyone who watches the news today, it's no surprise, there's a lot going on, right? Inflation, coming out of COVID. As you look at all the things that are going on, what do you see as the 2 biggest challenges facing, Idahoans or Americans as a whole? And if elected, how'd you tackle them?
So I think obviously right now, the biggest challenge we face as a country is inflation. And for me, the inflation that we're suffering from right now is the beginning of where I think we're headed. As a country, we're $30 trillion in debt. we are bringing in about $4 trillion a year, and we're spending $7 trillion. So, I'm not a student of the Common Core math program, so I can calculate that 10 years from now, we're going to be another $30 trillion in debt. All told, 10 years from now, we'll be $60 trillion in debt. And because of that, that's just borrowing money, printing money probably, quantitative easing, things like that. Because of that, the money supply is just bloated because of our spending. And so what we have now is we have runaway inflation. A lot of people like to blame it on maybe just recent events, but this has been a catastrophe in the making for several years. You just cannot continue to print money to pay for the things that we're doing without, at some point, inflation setting in. And we're now experiencing that. The velocity of money in the last 2 or 3 years has hit historic proportions, and that is a creation of the spending in Washington. And so in order for us to control inflation, we simply have to control our spending. And we have not had people in Congress willing to do that. And that's one of the things that distinguishes me from Mike Simpson. Just last week, he voted for the $1.5 trillion, it was the budget deal. You may remember the Democrats passed it out of committee in the middle of the night. It was 2,700 or 2,900 pages long, and by the next morning at 11 o'clock, Mike voted for that. I would not have voted for that. And that has at least $10 billion of pork, and it's got a lot of other spending. And so I look at Congress, and Congress has not done a good job. So that's one issue. And another issue that we have, and look, another issue we have is our energy. You said to mention too, but the price of gas is on everybody's mind. What we have is we do not have a long-term energy program in this country. You'll see it with, when Obama's president, we don't like nuclear, and we don't like the pipeline, and we don't like drilling on federal land. Then Trump becomes president, and now we like nuclear, and suddenly we're drilling on federal land, and we have the pipeline working, and gas is cheap. Then we get Biden, and it changes again. You cannot have a sustained energy policy in a country that it's changed every 4 years, depending on who the president is. So I think Congress needs to come up with a comprehensive energy plan that we need to follow, and it needs to be one that includes nuclear energy, it includes a pipeline, that includes our fracking and our ability to access our own resources. That's what we need to do, and if we could do that and have a plan that was 20 years long or 10 to 20 years, then it wouldn't be changed depending on who the president happens to be, the flavor of the month. And so it's a real problem for us. So I see that as two big issues. I also see the southern border wall as a big issue. Basically, we have an invasion in our country. And you can see that the current administration is doing not only nothing to stop it, they're actually enhancing it by busing people over the border and processing them in buildings and flying them around the country. So for me, I see that those are the big issues that we face.
So in DC, obviously, those are some very passionate issues, people on very different sides. How do you come together to get something done?
Well, one of the things that I will do to help get things done is that when I'm elected, I will quickly join the House Freedom Caucus. So now I will join other like-minded conservatives, people who think like me, and we'll work as a team to try to get a conservative agenda followed or passed or enacted, depending on what term you want to use. But the truth is that when the Democrats are in charge, what you really want to do is stop them from getting things done. And too often in Congress does things that don't help the American people. And so when you talk about getting things done, we need to also stop the Democrats, the liberals, and the leftists from accomplishing their agenda, like the green energy deal from AOC, or could be Nancy Pelosi's deal of the week, or whatever that is. Now, in terms of getting things done with the Democrats or Nancy Pelosi, the truth is that Nancy Pelosi and I probably aren't going to agree on anything, except that, we don't agree on anything. And so the truth is that I'm going to stick to my principles. I'm not going to compromise my principles. I'm not going to compromise my values. I've been a big supporter, for example, of repealing the grocery sales tax in the state of Idaho. I think it's an immoral tax. I think we're only one of 5 states that fully taxes groceries. And the interesting thing about that tax is that all the Democrats have wanted to repeal that tax. And everybody knows I was the one that took the case up to the Idaho Supreme Court when a Republican governor vetoed the grocery sales tax. The Democrats agreed with me, and a lot of the conservative Republicans agreed with me. The problem wasn't the conservative Republicans or the Democrats. The problem was some of the moderate and establishment Republicans within our own party. And so there are times when I suppose you can reach out and work with Democrats. The grocery sales tax is a good example. If there's an issue like that in Congress, I'm not one who's going to say, oh, well, the Democrats are agreeing with me on this, so I'm not going to do it. If it's good policy and it makes good sense, I will clearly work with anybody who wants to do that, whether it's an establishment Republican, a conservative Republican, it could be a Democrat. But when it comes to my principles and my values, things that I hold dear, look, I really believe that sometimes no deal is better than a bad deal. So that's kind of my approach to it.
All right, so one last question. A week from today, everyone's going into the ballot box. What do you want them to remember about you before they make their selection?
What I want people to remember is that with Brian Smith, you're going to get somebody who fights for you. I am a conservative who fights, and I am running to fight for you. That's what they're going to get with me. And I feel like we've been missing that. I will not only fight for Idahoans, but I'll fight for a conservative agenda. So we've had a history with our current representative of someone who has not stood up for the Second Amendment. I will stand up for the Second Amendment. We've also have our current representative wants to breach dams. I oppose that. I support farmers and their water. We have a current representative who has voted for massive spending increases and has also voted for bigger government. I believe that we need to cut the budget and that we should have a smaller government. So with me, the voters are going to get a completely different candidate. A very different, it's not a candidate actually, but at that point it will be a representative. I have also been very clear that I do not support special civil rights protected class status for transgender people. My opponent actually co-sponsored a bill with 20 other Republicans to make transgender rights a special protected class. I also oppose that. And so with me, you're going to see somebody who follows the conservative platform of the Republican Party. And I will be much different in the sense that I will speak out for us. We have not had somebody to speak on behalf of conservatives, and that's what I feel that I will bring that we have been lacking and missing. And so that is what I will tell you that people will get. And what I want people to remember is things will be different. We will have a conservative voice in Washington. And finally, people who are conservative in this state will have a voice and they will feel like they've been heard, whereas in the past several years, that's been missing.
Brian Smith, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So now we're going to be talking about another legislative district. So this is District 1, and we have Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us today. So I've been around the scene for a little bit, but let's pretend that we don't know who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
You know, Idaho farm kid is the way I like to kind of just think of myself, because that's the foundation for my life here. Family has a long history in the state of Idaho, and I've been blessed to have a varied life experience. And so from there, educated in Idaho institutions in business and engineering, and then on to the professional world in the technology industry with Micron and Preco Electronics for about 24 years all over the world and all over the country. And so I had the opportunity to serve in the Idaho State Legislature for 10 years, and while doing that, was a real estate broker. So a varied life experience and 3 fabulous kids and a great family. So this life has been a very good one for me, and I'm very blessed.
So U.S. Representative, one of the highest positions in the land, representing all of Idaho, at least in District 1. What makes you uniquely qualified?
Yeah, I think we're all a product of that life experience, and our value system comes from how we were raised and the things that we believe in. And so, what I had just mentioned in terms of life history plus just a grounding faith. Faith is a big deal to me, and that sets the foundation for how I attempt to live my life. And frankly, I think that coincides very well because our founding fathers had instituted a divinely guided document called the Constitution that was grounded in that. And that's certainly what I believe in as well, and that's what I attempt to stand up for within the U.S. Congress.
So the last few years, obviously COVID, things have just been crazy across the world, the country, and in Idaho. What do you think are two of the biggest issues facing Idahoans today? And if back to DC, what could we do about it?
Well, we have either lost or forfeited a lot of individual liberty. And the COVID has certainly exacerbated that. But we live in a republic, not a democracy. And that republic has a couple of prerequisites. One of those prerequisites is that our citizenry is educated in the issues, and another is that they are engaged with those issues. And so I think probably the single biggest thing that we face is just sometimes we're lacking in having educated, committed people that believe in the founding of this nation and the basis of this nation that will actually engage. If the people engage and this republic is exercised the way it was intended, we'll be fine. But that's problematic, and oftentimes good people don't engage that way. In terms of the issues, I mean, we've got border security, which is a federal responsibility that we have dropped the ball on, that we have simply not taken care of, and that has impacts on Idaho all across the nation. Our energy security is another huge one. If you take care of your own energy production and you control that, that sets so many other economic things into order. And so those are the main things I think that we're struggling with as a state and as a nation, but it can be solved if we exercise the republic the way it was intended to be.
So you alluded to this a second ago, and I think it's really relevant. It's something we hear from our members a lot across the state, and that is the sanctity of Idaho's sovereignty. And federal overreach has just been on a lot of people's minds. As our representative in Washington, D.C., how do you combat some of that and make sure that Idaho remains sovereign?
First of all, we just need to remember or understand that the federal government's powers constitutionally are really quite limited. It's restricted really to mainly the security of the people, which includes our military and our border security, and it includes the regulation of international commerce. Those are the two big things. Now, there are a few other things, but most everything else is left to the states and to local governments. And so just coming to grips with that, a lot of what I do in Washington, quite frankly, is to try to steer decisions local, to try to get the federal government out of some of the decision areas where they're so engaged. And it's not been simple. We are very polarized right now. And we have a leadership currently in Washington, D.C. that tries to exacerbate that polarization and drive us apart instead of driving us together. But that's the challenge that I think that we have. That's certainly what I face. More of the decisions need to be done locally. And I see part of my job is to try to make that happen. In order to do that, that means I have to be able to work across the aisle. I have to engage with my colleagues on the Democrat side, and you have to have the communication and the relationship building to make that happen. And so that's where my efforts go.
So one last one. I think you're a little bit lucky you're running unopposed in your district. But the primaries are 1 week from today. Now, a little bit between now and November for you, but what message do you want to leave Idahoans as they head to the ballot box next week, and then again as they head in November?
Well, this state was built on the foundations that I referred to earlier. This state, and I think the goodness of Idaho, is built on our faith. It's built on our families, and it needs that engagement to continue. And we have a lot of growth right now. And so when I meet new people and I speak to groups, I will inevitably ask how many people have come to our state within the last few years, and inevitably a lot of people will raise their hands. And so my message to them and my message here is, welcome to Idaho. Welcome to my family's home for well over 100 years. Now, don't forget why you came here, because you're coming to something or you left something that's better than where you were. And how you engage now will dictate if we can keep it that way. We want to keep it that way, and we need you and your involvement, your votes, your engagement, your understanding to make that happen. And I encourage that today, and that's what myself and my staff try to do.
U.S. Congressman Russ Fulcher joining us tonight. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Before we close, there's two things I want to remind you of. First, please don't forget to get out there and vote 1 week from today on May 17th. Regardless of who you're voting for, it's important to have your voice heard. That person has an opportunity to represent you and me and the entire state for the next 2, 4, or 6 years, and we need to take that seriously. The last thing is really to remind you that on May 18th, we all need to wake up, regardless of who wins the primary, and support that candidate. For all the differences, for all the uniqueness that God made with each of us, we're still one Republican Party. We have way more in common than we have apart. And so no matter who wins, I want to ask you to rally behind them, just like we will with Idaho Young Republicans, just like we will with the state party. And we're going to get out there and do everything we can to help that candidate win the election in November. That's how we keep conservative values alive in the state. That's how we keep Idaho red. For all that, I want to say thank you again. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care, God bless, and God bless Idaho.